The empty throne beside the Empress. The grand hall of the Galactic Council shimmered under the light of 1,000 floating crystals, each one glowing with power drawn from stars across the galaxy. Representatives from every known species stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the silver throne at the center. It was not just a throne, it was a symbol of fear, authority, and mystery, for it belonged to the alien Empress of the Zirian Dominion, ruler of half the known universe. When she entered the hall, the sound of her steps echoed like thunder. Every alien bowed their heads, wings or tendrils depending on their kind. None dared to look directly into her crimson eyes that had seen empires rise and burn to ash. She moved with grace that felt almost unnatural, her long white robes trailing like waves of light behind her. Beside her throne stood an empty chair, carved from obsidian, its surface reflecting the galaxy above. No one had ever dared to sit there, not for 1,000 years. Legends whispered that anyone who took that seat vanished without a trace, their minds shattered by the Empress's silent wrath. It was said that seat once belonged to a companion long ago, a being she had loved. Betrayed or perhaps lost in war, no one truly knew. The Empress sat upon her throne, her expression unreadable, her gaze sweeping over the council chamber around her. The galaxy's leaders spoke in hushed voices, discussing politics, alliances, and wars. Yet every few moments their eyes would drift to the empty chair, as if it were alive, as if it were watching them then. The doors at the far end of the hall opened. A single human walked in. Gasps echoed through the chamber, for no human had ever been invited here before. He was young, dressed in simple diplomat armor, plain silver plates with no decoration. His name was Alir, a representative of the Terran Alliance, a small and almost forgotten human nation at the galaxy's edge. Many in the room began to whisper, "Why is a human here?" One of the reptilian lords hissed, "They're primitive." Another spat, "They still believe in courage and honor." The Empress said nothing, only watched as Elior walked slowly toward her throne. Her voice, soft yet filled with power, broke the silence. "Human," she said. "Do you understand where you stand?" Elior stopped a few steps from her. He felt the weight of 1,000 eyes, the pressure of history itself, but he did not bow. Instead, he looked up at the Empress with calm eyes and said, "Yes, Your Majesty. I stand before fear." The hall went completely silent. Not even the sound of air could be heard. The Empress's crimson eyes narrowed, her gaze cutting through him like fire. Yet, there was something there, something deeper than anger. Perhaps curiosity, or perhaps the faint memory of something long lost. The alien guards raised their weapons, ready to strike, but the Empress lifted one hand, and they froze instantly. Her eyes never left the human. She whispered, "You are either very brave, or very foolish." Elior smiled faintly. "Sometimes they are the same thing." Then, before anyone could stop him, Elior stepped up the stairs to the throne. He looked at the empty chair beside the Empress, the one no one dared to touch, and he sat down. The entire chamber erupted in chaos. Some screamed, some shouted warnings. Others fled from the room as if death itself had appeared. The ground trembled slightly, a low hum echoing through the air. The crystals flickered, their lights dimming one by one. Even the Empress seemed momentarily frozen, her lips parting in disbelief. "You sat beside me," she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time in centuries. Elior turned to her, calm and unafraid. "Yes, because no one else would." She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to see through him. Then, slowly, she leaned closer, her voice now barely a whisper. "You do not understand what that seat means." Elior's eyes met hers, steady and clear. Maybe it's time someone did. A soft pulse shook the floor beneath them. The great hall lights flickered again, and a deep vibration rolled through the palace walls. Somewhere far below the throne room, ancient machinery that had been silent for ages began to stir. A hidden heartbeat echoed beneath the planet. Faint but growing stronger, the Empress rose to her feet in shock, her long silver hair flowing like light around her. Her guards shouted warnings, calling for engineers and soldiers, but she didn't hear them. Her eyes were locked on the human beside her. "Impossible," she breathed. "The core should be dead." Elior looked at the glowing floor under his boots, where faint symbols began to appear, ancient human letters forgotten by time, and for a moment, the Empress could have sworn she heard a distant voice whisper from the depths below. It spoke in the old Terran language, one she hadn't heard in centuries. "Welcome back," it said. The Empress felt her heart, a heart that had not truly beaten for ages, begin to race again. She turned to Elior, her voice shaking. "Who are you, human?" Elior's answer was calm, yet carried a strange weight. "Maybe," he said softly. "I'm the reason that seat was never truly empty." And in that moment, as the throne room trembled and the galaxy outside unknowingly shifted, the Empress realized that this human was not a fool nor a hero. He was something far more dangerous. He was the beginning of change, the whisper beneath the throne. The hall was empty now, silent except for the faint hum coming from deep below the marble floor. The Empress stood before the throne, her crimson eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Every guard and council member had been dismissed, only she and the human remained. Her long white robes moved like mist as she slowly walked around Elior, who still sat beside the throne. "Calm as if nothing had happened, what have you done?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling between anger and curiosity. Elior looked up at her, his expression peaceful. "I just sat down," he said. Her gaze hardened. "That seat is forbidden. It has been empty for centuries for a reason." He tilted his head slightly. "Then maybe the reason was waiting for me." The Empress stepped closer, her presence heavy like gravity. "Do you have any idea what you have awakened, human?" she whispered. Elior glanced at the floor where faint lines of golden light pulsed under his boots. Forming strange human-like symbols, he shook his head. "I only know it feels alive." The Empress froze, because that was exactly what it was. Beneath the palace, hidden under layers of crystal and alloy, lay the core of Dominion, a machine older than her empire. It had been silent since the day she lost her companion, a man who once sat beside her on that same throne, and now after all this time it was awakening again, responding not to her but to a human. The Empress reached out with her mind, touching the core's signal through her neural link. Instantly, she felt a storm of energy, codes, voices, forgotten memories rushing into her. It spoke in patterns too old to understand, but one message came clear. Human presence detected. The core whispered into her mind. Her eyes widened. "Impossible," she muttered. "You should not exist anymore." Elior stood slowly, his eyes reflecting the golden light underfoot. "What is this place?" he asked. She turned to him sharply. "This is the heart of my dominion, built long before your kind were even known to the stars." He frowned. "Then why does it know me?" Her silence was the only answer. Without warning, the ground trembled again. Stronger this time, the walls pulsed as if the palace itself had a heartbeat. From far outside, alarms began to echo, soft at first, then rising into a siren that shook the city. The Empress placed her hand on the air. A holographic display appeared, showing fleets moving above the planet. Her generals were panicking, reporting strange readings, energy spikes, and ancient systems powering on by themselves. "The core is reawakening," she whispered to herself. Elior looked up at the display. "Is that bad?" She gave him a long look. "If the core wakes completely, every ship in orbit will think the Dominion has declared war on the galaxy." Elior blinked. "Then maybe we should turn it off," she almost laughed, a rare, bitter sound. If only it were that simple. Human. The hum beneath them deepened, turning into a voice, not words, but a feeling that touched both of their minds. It was like an echo from the past, something that remembered them. The Empress's breath caught as the voice formed real words. "Empress. Companion?" Connection restored. She stepped back, her heart pounding. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." Elior frowned. "It called me companion?" Her eyes widened. "That word has not been spoken in this hall for centuries." He looked confused. "Then maybe I was meant to sit there." She turned away sharply, as if afraid of the thought itself. "You are playing with fire that burns worlds, human," she said coldly. "Leave while you still can." But as she said it, another tremor shook the floor. A crack formed near the steps of the throne, spilling out a faint mist of light. It wasn't just energy, it felt like memory, old and heavy. Elior reached down and touched the glowing crack. Images flooded his mind, visions of the past, an ancient war, a man standing beside the Empress holding her hand before the same throne. He saw her younger, not cold and distant, but smiling, her eyes soft, her laughter real, and then he saw fire, betrayal, and loss. When he opened his eyes, he was shaking. The Empress was staring at him, her own expression torn between rage and something else. Fear. "What did you see?" she demanded. Elior's voice was soft. You loved him. The room grew colder. She clenched her fists, her power pulsing through the air. Silence, human, she warned. Her voice breaking slightly, but Elior didn't stop. He was human, wasn't he? The Empress turned away, her eyes shining faintly like molten glass. I buried that truth long ago, she whispered, and sealed the core with it. She looked at him, her voice shaking. You woke it up. Just by sitting there. Elior stepped closer, his tone gentle. Maybe it needed to remember what it was made for. Her lips trembled. And what is that? He smiled faintly. To protect life, not control it, before she could answer. The sirens outside grew louder. A hologram appeared before her. One of her admirals shouting in panic, Your Majesty! Every fleet near the core system has gone dark. The energy pulse is spreading across star channels. The Empress turned off the transmission, her expression turning hard again. She looked at Elior. You have no idea what you've started. Human, he met her eyes calmly. Then tell me, so I can help finish it. For the first time in her long life, the Empress had no answer. The core pulsed again, louder now as if alive, and far below the throne, a machine older than the galaxy itself whispered one final message into the stars. The human has returned. The Empress's secret. The palace lights flickered as if the stars outside were trembling. The Empress stood before the great throne, her hands pressed against the armrest carved from black crystal. Elior stood near her, silent, watching her face as the core's hum filled the air like a heartbeat that refused to die. You must tell me the truth, he said quietly. The Empress did not look at him, her voice soft but sharp. The truth is dangerous. Human, Elior shook his head. The core called me companion. It showed me your past, and it knew my face. Her crimson eyes turned toward him slowly, shining with sadness and warning. Then you already know more than you should, she said. And that is why you are in danger. Elior took a slow step forward. The man I saw in the vision, he was human. The Empress's breath caught, though her expression stayed still. He was like me, wasn't he? Elior asked softly. He stood where I stand now. Her voice broke for the first time in centuries. Yes, she whispered. He was. She turned away and walked toward the tall window where the stars stretched across the black sky. Her reflection glowed against the glass, pale and distant, 1,000 years ago. Before the Dominion, before the Council, before the galaxy knew fear, she began slowly. I met a human explorer, one of the first from the lost planet Earth. Her tone softened as if the memory hurt. He called himself the Architect. He came to our world not with weapons, but with light. Elior listened, silent and still. He built the core, she said. He gave it purpose to preserve life, not rule it, to connect worlds in peace. Not chains, her eyes dimmed, but the Council wanted power. They wanted to use the core to control every star, every fleet, every mind, her voice trembled. When he refused, they called him a traitor. Elior's voice came low. What happened to him? The Empress turned, her face unreadable. He disappeared, she whispered. Some say he died. Others say he became part of the core itself. Her eyes met Elior's, glowing faintly. He promised he would return when the galaxy was ready to remember humanity. She took a step closer. And now you are here with his face, his words, and his defiance. The floor pulsed again with light, forming golden rings under Elior's feet. He felt warmth spreading through him, like something inside the core recognized his presence. The Empress looked down, her lips trembling slightly. It sees you as him, Elior frowned, but I'm not him. Maybe not, she said. But you carry what he carried, his code. His essence, his will. A deep hum rose beneath them, echoing across the hall. Holographic symbols appeared in the air, ancient Terran letters glowing around the throne. The Empress whispered the translation. Authorization detected. Awakening sequence initiated. Elior stepped back. What does that mean? Her voice grew tense. It means the core is opening again for the first time in 1,000 years. The palace trembled, light beams rising through the cracks in the floor, reaching toward the sky like columns of gold outside. Ships across the Dominion detected the surge, their alarms filling the void from orbit. It looked like the planet itself was being reborn, glowing with a pulse that matched the heartbeat of a human. The Empress placed a hand on her chest, feeling a rhythm she hadn't felt in ages. The core was connected to her life, tied to her blood, and now that it was awakening again, It was drawing power from both of them. Elior turned to her. You can stop it, can't you? Her eyes were distant. No, she said. Not without destroying everything. He took a step forward. Then tell me what to do. She stared at him, searching his face for weakness, for fear, but found none. You really do not fear me, she whispered. Not even now. Elior smiled faintly. You've been feared enough for a lifetime. Someone has to see you as more than that. The Empress looked away, her chest rising with something close to a sigh. You speak like him, she murmured. The same words, the same foolish kindness. Then, before she could continue, the throne itself began to shift. The black crystal cracked apart, revealing an inner layer of silver light. Inside was a holographic figure, faint, but human. It was the architect, or rather his memory. The voice filled the room, calm and steady. If you are hearing this, it said, then the core has chosen again. The Empress's eyes widened, her hand trembling. No, it can't be. Elior looked up at the image. Chosen what? The hologram turned toward him, its face almost identical to his own. The one who sits beside the Empress, it said, is the keeper of balance. The bridge between creation and control. Elior froze. You mean? The image nodded. The core lives through you now. The light vanished, leaving silence so heavy it hurt. The Empress stared at Elior with disbelief, her voice barely a whisper. Then the prophecy was true, he frowned. What prophecy? She looked down, her voice trembling. That the human who returns to the throne will awaken the lost heart of the galaxy and destroy all false gods. Outside, thunder rolled through the atmosphere as lightning danced across the skies. The core's awakening was no longer hidden, and far away in the deep halls of the Galactic Council, alarms began to ring. The old powers had felt the signal too, and they were afraid. The Empress turned to Elior one last time, her eyes glowing softly. You have no idea what your presence means. Human. He looked at her, steady and calm. Maybe not yet, he said, but I think you do. And for the first time in centuries, the Empress smiled, not with pride, not with cruelty, but with something she thought she had lost forever, hope. The human who remembered. The palace was quiet again, but it was not the silence of peace, it was the silence before a storm. The core beneath the throne hummed like a living heart, sending golden light through cracks in the floor. The Empress stood near the window, her red eyes watching the endless stars while the human sat beside the throne. Deep in thought, he could still hear the hologram's words echoing inside his head. The one who sits beside the Empress, the keeper of balance, that voice was his own. Yet older, wiser, filled with something ancient. It felt like a memory trying to wake inside him. Elior closed his eyes, and in the darkness, the visions returned. He saw flashes of the past, the first human ships crossing black space, the building of the core, the laughter of the young Empress as she walked beside a human man who looked exactly like him. Then came war, betrayal, fire, and silence. He saw the same man, the architect, turn to her in their final moment and say, Remember me when you look at the stars. Elior gasped and opened his eyes. His heart racing, the Empress turned sharply, her voice low. What did you see? He looked at her, dazed. Everything. She studied him, her eyes full of stormlight. Then you know the truth. He nodded slowly. The man you loved. I carry his memories. Her face softened for only a second before she looked away. Love is not a word I use anymore, she said coldly. It is a weakness in a world that eats its own heart. Elior smiled faintly. Then why are you trembling? The Empress froze, her hand tightening at her side. No one had ever dared to speak to her like that, not in centuries. You think this is easy? She said softly. To see his face again in another man after losing everything because of him? Elior stood and stepped closer. You didn't lose everything, Empress. You buried it. Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. He continued. The core isn't just waking because of me. It's waking because you never truly let go. The Empress turned toward him, and for the first time there was no fire in her eyes, only pain. I sealed the core with my own hand, she whispered. I swore no human would touch it again. Not after what the council did to him. She paused, her voice shaking. They used his creation to enslave worlds, to make gods out of tyrants, and Her voice broke. I helped them. Elior listened in silence, his eyes calm but burning with quiet understanding. You were trying to survive, he said gently. You thought it was the only way. Her gaze fell to the glowing floor. I thought I could control the darkness, but it controlled me instead. Suddenly the palace trembled. A low rumble shaking dust from the ceiling outside. Crimson light flashed across the sky as fleets began to move in orbit. The Empress's eyes widened. They're coming! Who? Elior asked. The Council, she said, her voice grim. They've detected the core's awakening, and they fear what it means. She touched a control on her arm, and a hologram appeared. A sea of alien warships surrounding the planet. Their weapons charged. They're not here to talk, she whispered. They're here to erase everything that remembers humanity. Elior clenched his fists. Then we have to stop them. Her eyes flickered with amusement. You plan to fight fleets with courage alone, human? He smiled. No, with memory. He walked toward the throne and placed his hand on its glowing surface. Instantly, the core responded, the golden lines on the floor surging with power. A bright pulse shot through the palace. Lighting the sky for miles, the Empress stepped back, shielding her eyes. What are you doing? Elior's voice echoed through the hall, calm but filled with strength. I'm remembering what he built. All across the Dominion, machines began to stir. Old Terran structures hidden under alien cities lit up one by one. Every sensor in the galaxy felt it. The signature of the lost human network coming back to life. The Empress stared in disbelief. You're reactivating the old defense grid. Elior nodded slowly. He designed it to protect life, not destroy it. But you all used it as a weapon. Her voice softened. You're doing what he couldn't finish. Elior looked at her. No, what we couldn't finish. The ground shook violently again, and the core's voice filled the air. Connection complete. Access restored to Terran memory systems. The palace lights dimmed, replaced by a soft golden glow that surrounded both of them. The Empress felt warmth spreading through her body, unfamiliar and frightening. Elior's presence was awakening something within her, not power. But humanity, you feel it too, don't you? Elior asked. She looked at him silently, then whispered, yes. But I don't want to. He smiled gently. It's not weakness, it's what makes us alive. Outside, the alien fleets opened fire, beams of blue and red slamming into the planet's shield. But the energy didn't penetrate, instead it dissolved into light. The core was defending them, expanding its reach. The Empress watched in awe. It's protecting us. Elior's eyes glowed faintly. No, it's protecting hope, she turned to him, her voice breaking again. You're going to die for this, you know. He smiled softly. Then I'll die reminding the galaxy what it means to be human. For a moment, she said nothing, then stepped closer, her voice low. I won't let that happen. Her hand brushed his shoulder, her touch cold yet gentle. If the core must protect hope, she said, then maybe it needs both of us. Their eyes met, human and alien, light and shadow, past and present, and as the core pulsed brighter beneath them, the stars outside shifted as if bowing to something greater than fear. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Empress whispered a human word, together. The Council's judgment, the galaxy burned with whispers. Every channel, every world, every command post spoke the same words. The core of Dominion has awakened, and with it the fear of humanity returned to the stars. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, a storm of light filled the air. Hundreds of alien delegates shouted over one another, their voices echoing in panic. The Empress has betrayed us, one cried. She revived the human curse. Another slammed his clawed hand on the table. We cannot let the Terrans rise again. High above them, the ancient sigil of the Council glowed, a reminder of their centuries of rule built on lies. A tall being cloaked in shadow stood and raised its voice. The core is a weapon. It must be silenced before the galaxy burns again. The chamber went quiet. He continued, we shall gather every fleet, every soldier, and strike before the Empress unleashes it fully. No one dared to object. They feared her power, but they feared humanity far more. Back on the Empress's world, the palace shook with the sound of thunder. Elior and the Empress stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Above them, the sky was alive with golden light, the core's energy forming a massive shield that covered the planet. Below, millions of alien citizens watched in awe and terror as the light danced above their heads. They're coming, the Empress said quietly, her crimson eyes reflecting the fire of the stars. Elior nodded, then let them come. She turned to him. You don't understand, human. This is not a war you can win with courage, he smiled faintly. Maybe not. But courage is how wars are remembered. The Corps' voice spoke again, calm and deep like the voice of creation itself. Warning, multiple fleets detected, incoming in all directions. The Empress opened a command hologram. Hundreds of red dots filled the screen, representing enemy ships. The Council sent everyone, she whispered. They mean to erase us both. Elior placed his hand on the edge of the railing, his eyes steady. Then we remind them why they feared us in the first place, he said softly. She turned toward him, surprised. You would destroy them? He shook his head. No, I'll show them mercy. Her eyes narrowed. Mercy? He nodded. That's what makes humans dangerous. We fight with our hearts, not just our hands. The first wave of enemy ships entered orbit, their engines burning like small suns. The Council broadcasted a message across all frequencies. This is your final warning, Empress of Zyria. Surrender the core or face total annihilation. The Empress smiled bitterly. They speak of annihilation as if it were a choice. She looked at Elior. What will you do, Keeper of Balance? He took a deep breath. I'll make them remember who built this galaxy. He stepped forward, placing both hands on the glowing throne. Instantly, the core responded. Light poured through the floor and walls, surrounding them in golden radiance. The Empress shielded her eyes. What are you doing? Elior's voice echoed through the palace. Connecting. In orbit, every ship's systems began to flicker. Engines stalled, weapons failed, and communication screens filled with Terran code. The core was reaching into their machines. Disabling them one by one, admirals screamed in confusion. We've lost control. The old Terran network had reawakened, spreading across the stars like a wave of light. The Empress stared at Elior in disbelief. You're controlling them. Elior's eyes glowed faintly with golden light, not controlling, showing them what they forgot. The screens across the fleets changed, showing images of Earth, the old human homeworld, oceans, forests, cities, children laughing. Every soldier saw it, every commander felt it. The forgotten beauty of the species they once feared. In the council chamber, panic turned to silence. One of the elders whispered, they were not gods of war. They were creators. The others looked around, realizing the truth buried for millennia. It was never humanity's strength that made them powerful. It was their will to protect life, even when the galaxy turned against them. Back on the palace balcony, the Empress felt tears on her cheeks. She touched them in surprise. She hadn't cried in 1,000 years. Elior turned to her, his voice soft but strong. They will remember now, she looked at him, and what of us? He smiled gently. We'll face their judgment together. Suddenly, the core's light flickered. The massive power starting to overload, the Empress shouted. You're pushing it too far, it can't hold. Elior didn't move, his voice calm. If it falls, let it fall with truth. The core pulsed one last time, sending a wave across the galaxy, an echo of light carrying a single message to every world. Humanity never died, it endured. The energy burst faded. Leaving silence above the planet, the council fleet stopped their fire. Their weapons dimmed. No one spoke, no one moved. The entire galaxy stood still, watching a human and an alien empress standing together beneath the golden sky. For the first time in history, the council did not give an order. They watched in awe, not as rulers, but as witnesses to something greater. The Empress turned toward Elior, her voice low. You changed everything, he smiled. No. We did, and as the stars flickered back to calm, a new dawn rose over the Dominion, one built not on fear but on understanding. But deep in the council's shadows, something still stirred, a whisper of those who refused peace. The war wasn't over yet, it had only just begun. The core of humanity. The light from the core spread across the horizon, bathing the Empress's palace in soft gold. The warships above the planet floated silently, their weapons cold, their crews staring at the strange beauty that surrounded them. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy was quiet. The sound of fear had been replaced by something new, awe. Elior stood at the center of the throne room, still connected to the core. Golden energy moved through his veins like living fire. He could feel every ship, every signal, every world that the core reached. It was as if the stars themselves were whispering to him. The Empress watched from a few steps away, her eyes reflecting both fear and wonder. You are becoming something else, she said softly. Elior turned to her, his voice calm. I'm only showing them what we were. The floor pulsed beneath their feet, and images appeared in the air, floating visions of humanity's past. Cities glowing under blue skies, children running through fields, soldiers standing in defense of hope, not conquest. Every image shimmered like a dream brought back to life. The Empress stepped closer, her voice trembling. This is what your people were? Elior nodded slowly. This is what we are. She touched one of the light streams as it passed, her fingers glowing faintly. I thought your kind were destroyers, she whispered. That was what the council taught us, he smiled gently. They feared us because we wouldn't kneel, the Core's voice echoed softly through the hall. Primary sequence complete, Terran network awakened. Elior looked upward, his eyes bright. It's awake. The Empress frowned. What does that mean? He took a deep breath. It means Earth is no longer silent. High above the Dominion, ancient satellites hidden in forgotten orbits began to power on. Their lights blinked to life one after another, forming patterns across the void. Signals rippled through the black of space, touching systems thought dead for ages, far beyond the Council's reach. Something old, something human answered back. The Empress watched as the Core's light climbed toward the sky, splitting into golden lines that connected with the stars. Each beam reached a distant world where dormant Terran stations awoke. She whispered, Your kind built all this? Elior nodded. We built it for everyone, but they turned it into fear. She looked down, guilt flickering across her perfect features, and I was part of that. He stepped closer. You can still be part of what comes next. Suddenly, the room shook, the Core's glow flashing red for a moment. A warning tone filled the air. The Empress spun around. What's happening? Elior's voice deepened, echoing with the Core's energy. They're trying to override it. Who? She asked. The Council, he said. They're attempting to take back control. The golden light around him began to flicker as foreign signals pushed against the Core. The Empress raised her hand and summoned her command network. Holographic codes spinning in the air. I can block them, she said quickly, her fingers moving with impossible precision. Her own neural systems linked to the Core. Merging her mind with his, Elior turned to her in shock. You'll burn yourself out, she smiled faintly. I ruled through fear for 1,000 years. Let me fight for something real once. Their hands touched, and a surge of light filled the throne room. The Core responded instantly, its energy stabilizing, its pulse growing stronger. The two of them, human and alien, merged their wills into a single thought. Unity. Outside, the Council's fleets fired again, beams of destruction striking the planet's shields. But instead of breaking, the light from the Core expanded outward, swallowing the fire and turning it into pure energy. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon froze as their systems recognized a code older than their species. The Core's voice thundered across all communication channels. Directive confirmed, humanity protocol active. Hostiles disarmed, and just like that, every weapon in the fleet powered down. No one could fire, no one could move. The galaxy stood still again, bound by the will of the Terran Core. The Empress gasped as she saw her own fleets halt mid-attack. Elior looked exhausted but calm. It's done. She turned to him. You've made them powerless, he nodded. No, I've made them choose. Choose, she echoed. Yes, he said. Between fear and peace, the Council's transmission appeared in the air, showing the Elders' panicked faces. You cannot control the galaxy, one shouted. Elior smiled faintly. I'm not controlling it. I'm freeing it, the Core's voice echoed behind him. Network alignment complete. Terran legacy restored. Then, something unexpected happened. The energy that had surrounded the planet began to fade. Slowly dissolving into starlight, the Core was not taking power. It was giving it back. One by one, the ships regained control. The systems rebooting, but without hostility. Every captain, every soldier felt the same message in their minds. A single human phrase translated into every language across the stars. Remember who you are? The Empress watched in awe as the galaxy's fleets pulled back. The war that had nearly begun simply ended. Elior sank to one knee, the golden light fading from his skin. She rushed forward and caught him before he fell. Elior, she whispered, you did it. He smiled weakly. No, we did it. The Core dimmed, its work complete. The throne room glowed softly with the light of dawn filtering through the windows. The Empress held the human in her arms, her voice breaking. You showed them what humanity really meant. He looked up at her, his eyes tired but peaceful. Now it's your turn to show them what comes next. And as the first sunrise touched the palace spires, the Empress stood tall once more, her heart no longer cold for the first time in ages. The galaxy had seen humanity not as conquerors but as creators of hope, and beside her, the human who remembered became the legend the stars would never forget. The seat beside the Empress. The morning after the light faded, the world felt new. The skies above the Dominion were clear for the first time in ages. Touched by soft gold instead of fire, the core beneath the palace slept quietly, humming like a calm sea, no longer a weapon but a guardian. Every being who saw the dawn whispered the same words. The war is over. Elior awoke in the great hall, the same place where it had all begun. The seat beside the throne still shone faintly, waiting for him. He looked weak, his body marked with faint lines of golden light, the last traces of the core's energy. The Empress stood beside him, silent and proud, her crimson eyes softer than ever before. "You shouldn't be awake yet," she said gently. Her voice no longer sharp or cold. He smiled faintly. "Humans are stubborn, remember?" She almost laughed. "I remember." For a long moment they said nothing, only listening to the hum of life returning to the palace. Beyond the walls, alien ships hovered peacefully in the sky. No weapons, no threats, only quiet respect. The Council's fleets had retreated, but messages poured in from across the galaxy. Worlds once ruled by fear now asked for peace, for guidance, for something real. The Empress turned toward the window, her silver hair catching the light. "All my life I believed power was control," she said softly. "But you showed me it can also mean protection." Elior looked at her, his voice calm. "You always had that power. You just needed to remember." She nodded slowly, a small smile touching her lips. "Maybe humans were not the ones who vanished," she said. "Maybe it was our hearts." He tried to stand, but his legs trembled. Without a word, she reached out and helped him rise. Their hands stayed together longer than either expected. The hall, once filled with fear, now glowed with quiet warmth. As they walked to the twin thrones, Elior stopped, looking at the empty chair beside hers. "That seat," he whispered, "was never just a chair, was it?" She shook her head. "It was meant for the one who understood me, the one who would balance what I could not." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe it was waiting for us both." The Empress looked at him for a long moment, then gestured toward the seat. "This time," she said softly, "sit not as a challenger, but as my equal." Elior nodded, his steps slow but steady. He sat beside her once more, the golden light beneath the floor responding instantly. It was no longer the hum of power but the rhythm of peace. Outside, every communication channel lit up. Millions of beings from every species watched the broadcast. They saw the Empress of Zyria and the human ambassador sitting side by side upon the twin thrones. And for the first time they saw not rulers and subjects, but partners. The Empress raised her hand, her voice calm but strong, carried through every speaker. "The Dominion is no more," she said. "From this day forward, there will be the union of worlds bound not by fear, but by choice." Her eyes turned to Elior. "And it begins with this human, who reminded us of who we were meant to be." Elior spoke next, his tone gentle yet powerful. "Humanity is not a threat," he said. "We are a memory of what every life once was, curious, brave, and kind." He paused, looking straight into the camera drone that floated before them. "If you still fear us," he added softly, "then learn from us instead." The crowd outside erupted in light as every city across the Dominion celebrated. Ships fired beams of color into the air, not as weapons but as symbols of unity. Children of every species sang the old Terran melody that the core had released, a song older than empires. The galaxy, once divided, began to breathe as one. The Empress turned to Elior quietly, her voice almost a whisper lost under the music. "You could have left. You could have gone back to your people," Elior smiled, "and missed the universe learning how to live again." She laughed softly, something pure and real. "You're impossible, human." He grinned. "So I've been told." They sat in silence for a while, watching the dawn climb higher over the city. The twin thrones stood side by side, no longer symbols of rule, but of balance, and in that light the Empress spoke one last truth. "For so long they feared sitting beside me," she said quietly, "because they thought I would destroy them." Elior looked at her. "And now?" She smiled, her crimson eyes shining with warmth. Now they see the truth, she whispered. I was only waiting for someone brave enough to stay. Outside, the core's last pulse rippled through space. It carried a single message written in human code to every world, every star, every forgotten machine. No one dared sit beside the Empress until a human did, and together, they taught the galaxy how to hope again. And as the music of the new age rose across the stars, the Empress and the human sat side by side, not as rulers, not as gods, but as friends. The golden light faded, leaving only peace, and the soft heartbeat of a living galaxy.